Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a lovely guest for you today, Kat Newport, coming out of Canada. And she is going to talk to us all about communication, leadership, what to do in times of crisis, conflict. There's this great, I want to ask her about, negotiations and in high stakes situations. And I'm really happy to have her on the show. So, Kat, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Doc. Appreciate it.
Yeah, all my friends, we're very informal, so all my friends call me Chris, and start off by your background, your story, what you do, how you got there, and how you can benefit the audience, very briefly, because I know you can really elaborate on things.
For sure. I will try and keep it to a fairly concise elevator pitch. I have 30 years of experience in leadership in a service industry, dealing with a variety of environments, industrial, healthcare, whole nine yards. I'm a mediator. I'm an International Coaching Federation certified coach. I'm an author of the book Smart Conflict, and a quality professional and change management professional. If you want conflict, try quality and change. They're rife with it. So after many, many years in corporate environment, I stepped out and took a bit of a sabbatical, wrote my book, knowing that when I was in corporate, managing conflict was a hot topic. So figured that was a good niche to kind of jump into. So I'm now a conflict coach, a mediator, and a conflict educator.
Interesting. So, because I love this idea because, we think, a lot of the podcast guests, we talk about these kind of rosy ideals, but actually the path is actually, it's ups and downs and valleys. Sometimes you're in the valley for quite a long time. So, talk about just what is smart conflict. I'm curious about what that means.
Smart conflict. So, smart conflict actually started out as a workshop. So, it actually developed from an acronym, and it translated very nicely into my book. And smart conflict, at its core and at its crux, is pushing us to take a look at what we're bringing into the conflict before we try to win the conflict or before we try to change the other person. So, smart conflict is a way to approach conflicts and engage in the relationship with the other person to get the best possible outcome.
Yeah. Interesting. And so the next question I have for you is because in this era of conflict, because we've got political conflict, we've got relationship conflict, generational conflict, workplace conflict, all these types of conflicts. It seems like everybody's fighting these days. And there was this great book called I believe it was Never Split the Difference, where he's talking about, Chris, he's talking about these in high stakes, high pressure, high outcome, and high emotions. So how do you manage all of these in these to get the best possible outcome? What's your approach? How can a mediator, conflict mediator start? Talk about their process.
So, a couple of things came to mind as you were setting up your question. The first thing that I would really encourage, and I do with my mediation clients, is have them self-reflect. What is it that you're actually going after? It's been my experience, particularly in estate management mediation, that a lot of folks don't really know why they're in conflict to start with. It's the toothpaste cap analogy. I'm going to get a divorce because my partner left the toothpaste top off the toothpaste tube again. When that's probably not the reason you're getting a divorce. So really self-reflecting on why you're engaging. Then you've got to figure out what your boundaries are. What are your negotiables and what are your non-negotiables? What are you willing to be drop dead about and walk away from? And what are you willing to do give and take to invest in the relationship so you can have healthy conflict, which means conflict that's moving, conflict that has momentum. Unhealthy conflict gets stuck. So those are the first two things that came to mind.
Interesting. And so, to follow up on these, these thoughts and ideas, when these conflicts emerge, emotions, tensions, are high, what's the best approach? Is it kind of walk away, let it, and then come back, or because I know, like frequently there's just hysteria or just kind of, people trying to assert their point and, it's quite emotionally exhausting and draining. So what is the best approach in these high stakes situations?
Gotcha. Do you want to put a bit of a star on this one, a bit of a caveat on this one? We're actually engaging in conflict every day, and most of it doesn't have this high emotional stake involved. For example, right now I'm disagreeing with you. We're in conflict, but neither of us are upset. Neither of us are nervous. We're not worried about the outcome. We have a difference of opinion, and that is all. And most of our conflicts are like that. So with the little star on that, swinging back around, once you do start getting into high emotion conflict, you've really got to understand where the emotion is coming from. What you bring into the situation is likely to be what you're going to reap from that situation. And every human being has a conflict narrative. What have I learned over the course of my life on how to deal with conflict? Did I have a parent who liked to yell? Did I have a parent who ignored me? Did my partner really have issues? That kind of thing. So really understanding what your narrative is and what you're bringing in, and if necessary, definitely hit that pause button.
Yeah. The other, yeah, and I love this idea. The other question I had for you is how do you be both assertive as well as empathetic in communication to effectively resolve conflicts?
This is an excellent question. I get this a lot. How do I still build that relationship but protect myself? So this is about understanding boundaries and really focusing on boundary building before you ever get into a conflict. And when I say boundaries, I'm talking about a living, breathing sort of barrier, more like a hedge than a concrete wall topped with glass. These are things that help us interact with other people in a healthy way while preserving our autonomy and independence. So understanding that going into this relationship, Chris, if you're my boss, I know there's certain things that I have to do, but I will not give up my weekend to work on your project. And I'm sorry, but I won't. This is my boundary. And then engaging with that, knowing the needs of my boss, knowing the needs of the organization, as well as knowing my own needs. So there's that understanding of where you're coming from, and then the understanding of the situation and the understanding of where the other person is coming from.
Interesting. In a lot of the conflict these days is between just kind of generations, because like, you've got kind of almost, I would say, close to, close to 80-year generational difference between the boomers and the Gen Z. And so, and especially in the workplace where now a lot of boomers they still have to continue to work because of the life expectancy and just, everything. So, how do you navigate generational differences in families, organizations? What are some principles? Because they're basically operating from two different maps. Like one was during a war, and then another one is like where we've got smartphones and information all readily available.
Absolutely. So when you look at a typical workplace, you can have up to 5 different generations operating in the same space at the same time. And what defines a generation are the life experiences. So to your point here, the boomers experienced, the end of a war. They were around for Korea. They were around for Vietnam. These are life-altering, life-changing things. We get into the Xers. We lived through the 80s crash, all of these things. So every generation right up to the tech natives all have a different point of view. But that's the same with anybody. If you're a Gen Xer and I'm a Gen Xer, we still have different points of view. I'm Canadian, you're American. Inherent point of view difference. It's just a small line on a map, but we still have different points of view. So really understanding that, yes, okay, I'm talking to a millennial. However, that millennial is still a human. They are still a person. They have a frame of reference, but they can definitely transcend that frame of reference. So when we sit here and start labeling and judging other people simply because of their birth date, we run into the problem of people then defending themselves or coming across more harshly than they intended.
Interesting. And moving to the workplace, another question is, conflicts in the workplace, and some of the most common challenges people face is, they're afraid to speak up because either, because their livelihoods are at stake. So how do you navigate these types of conflict? How can you effectively, balance this in the face of, you could lose your job, or you could get demoted, these sort of ramifications.
So we've got ramification versus fear, because they're both existing in the same space. Absolutely. If I go to my boss and I ask for a raise and I say, you're going to give me a raise or I'm going to quit and you're a terrible boss, yeah, pretty sure I'm going to not get the raise and, be on the unemployment line. So it's really understanding whether those ramifications are valid, and if they're valid, to what degree. Humans as a species, we're pretty risk adverse. We don't like to take risks. We don't like to step out. And the sensation of fear is what keeps us from going too far. But we really have to be realistic with what too far actually is. Am I being, realistic? Is Chris really going to bite my head off if I say I don't want to go play baseball with him on the weekend? Probably not. But I'm just going to ghost him instead because I don't want to approach him, just in case we're never be friends again. We have to look at the risk while assessing the signposts that the emotions are, because emotions are signposts. They're not impetus. They're not things to make us act. They're signposts saying something's not quite right, and then logically deciding what you're going to do with that signpost.
Yeah, really interesting. And another thought that was quite enlightening is you talk about resilience and its role in conflict management, and I'm just curious, what is the connection between resilience and conflict management, and how can individuals develop this trait?
I love that these two questions came back to back, because resilience ties directly into your ability to effectively identify risk and manage fear. If you are confident mentally, emotionally, and physically, you're more likely to engage in conflict in a healthy way. I have the mental, emotional, and physical capacity to do so because I'm taking care of myself. I have more than one friend. So if I argue with my one friend, I still have other friends while I go to repair that relationship. As opposed to only having one friend, now I have no friends. Oh my gosh. So there's that social piece, that emotional piece that goes with it. Intellectually, understanding what conflict is, how to engage with it positively, all super important. But if the head and the heart, the head and the emotions aren't aligned, resiliency is not there. I know what to do, but I'm scared to use it. And then physically, if we're all stressed out, if we're exhausted, if we haven't gone to the gym in 3 months, if we haven't, gotten out and done our hobbies that get our body moving, we are going to be fatigued, and we're going to be less likely to engage in conflict healthily, and be less likely to bounce back quickly from that conflict. So they do go hand in hand.
Interesting. So yeah, it sounds like a lot of because here it sounds like a lot of conflict management. Some people are conflict avoidant because they just don't want to have to deal with those types of emotions. But it sounds like conflict management can be actually positive if you look at it in a beneficial way. Kind of rounding it out, you've done a lot of work community with the mediation and Calgary section. So what impact has it had on the community? And I love how you're giving back and contributing.
So I really enjoy the people aspect of conflict. I know it's going to sound a little bit weird, but I think conflict is actually an investment in a relationship. And the more people I can change their perspective just a little bit on conflict, saying, no, I have to have this conflict because my relationship will be better after. I'm investing in understanding, I'm investing in communication, and I'm investing in forward momentum. Super important. So working on the board of the International Coaching Federation, working on the board of the American Society for Quality, volunteering in the community as a mediator to help neighbors, build a way forward. All really important to me, and I think I'm making a difference, and on the inside, that's what's important to me, the people side.
Yeah. And from talking to you this past half hour, it sounds like you possess a lot of skill sets in this area. A lot of people I talk to, they have skill sets in like marketing and entrepreneurship. And so with this skill set and with this particular outlook, it sounds like you're very curious about the nature of conflict in a very healthy and positive way. What sort of roles or positions or jobs, people listening could look into to take advantage of this skill set?
I think any job where you work with other people, you're going to need conflict management skills. As we move into workplaces that are more and more dominated by AI, as they're more and more dominated logically by computer systems, there's one thing that's never going to change, and that is our need to engage with other human beings. And AI, as good as it can be, is never, ever going to replace that. So I think any job needs some conflict management skills, some more than others, but I think everybody needs the skills.
Yeah. Yeah, when you talk, what comes to mind is kind of like human resources or maybe like a manager, any sort of managerial executive, these types of high level positions. Interesting that you mentioned AI. That's going to be, very, very interesting. And we're not really sure about the fundamentals or the ramifications. So the other question I have is for guests, they always say that leaders are readers, and you have a wonderful library in the background. What, excuse me, what books would you recommend in this area? Top three books that you've read that can recommend to the audience?
Apart from my own, Coaching for Performance is definitely one that I would strongly recommend. This talks about how to get the best performance out of your teams. So we're talking leaders and managers here while investing in the individual. So again, very human based. I love High Conflict. She deals with conflict on an international scale, but there are some really heavy takeaways in that book for sure. And The Fear Cure also comes to mind, understanding how our perceptions feed our fears and our fears feed how we interact with reality. So those would be the top three, besides my own book, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about your book as well, and how can people find it and check it out.
Absolutely. So my book is called Smart Conflict, Turning Disputes into Growth Opportunities. It's available on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and on Kindle. I enjoy the read very much. I think I'm a little biased, though. It helps readers not only go through the logic of conflict, but it also encourages self-reflection through journaling and challenging perception out there at Amazon, or you can get it on my website at smartconflictbook.com.
Interesting. And for all the audience, I really enjoyed this, and be sure to check out Kat's recommendations and check out her book. It's on Amazon. Leave a 5-star review, like and follow her socials, and thanks so much for coming on.